Folks, I have got a great video clip here for you. I've got an Englishman who has scorched Nancy Pelosi to her face, insulted Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the Democrat Party. I'm talking about a debate going on over in Oxford, England. Got the backstory on the whole thing here for you directly. Nancy Pelosi and her husband were over at Oxford College listening to a live debate, a yearly thing that goes on there, and things didn't go the way they planned. Let's go ahead and get into it. It's a little bit of a long video, folks. I'll stop it several times just so I don't get copyright issues. But this is really, really good stuff. Listen closely to what this guy's saying. He's talking about the conservative movement versus the socialist movement as to what's going on their side of the map, on their side of the pond, versus what's going on our side of the pond. And he calls Pelosi out right to her face. I love it. I love it. Stick around, folks, to the end. Like I said, it's a little bit of a long video, but you will not be disappointed. Here we go. And let me show you something real quick. If you look right here in this red circle, that's Pelosi and Paul Pelosi right beside her. All right. I'm going to jump right down here and do a little bit of reading for you folks. Got my goggles on. It says Nancy Pelosi and her husband Paul took a break from their insider trading to attend a public debate at Oxford University, or Union, in Oxford, England. The Oxford Union is a highly esteemed debating society and is one of Britain's oldest university unions, founded in 1823. Nancy and Robert attended the Oxford Union debate on April 25th and on populism, hours after she was interrupted by pro-Gaza protesters from Youth Demand who supported Gaza militants and want to put an end to fossil fuels. So she's getting it from both ends. She's getting it from the Gaza militants and the Greenpeace people, obviously, the climate nuts. It's good to know. I like to see her catch both barrels from both ends. Not physically, but you know what I'm saying. At any rate, it says it was during the debate that Pelosi was finally given a proper public thrashing that she deserved by one of British's rising stars, Winston Marshall. Winston Marshall is a popular writer, musician, and a podcaster. Marshall was also part of the British folk rock group Mumford and Sons, where he was a lead guitarist and won a Grammy and 2 Brit Awards. Marshall was forced out of the band after posting a tweet saying journalist Andy Ngo was brave for his book, to which he says far-left activists have radical plans to destroy democracy, which is absolutely true. And if you don't know who Andy Ngo is one of the people that has been attacked many, many times. He's a journalist. He is a Oriental guy. I don't know what nationality exactly, but he is homosexual, and he has stood up many times to film the Antifa riots and what was going on during the Black Lives Matter riots, just to get good footage and to expose some things, and in turn got caught right in the crossfire of the riots many a times, and been attacked and arrested in several other incidences. If you don't know about Andy Ngo, go check him out. He is a very brave journalist that has done a lot to expose Antifa and a lot of things that were going on, even some things about the January 6th Capitol. But at any rate, Winston Marshall participated in the debate on populism and its perceived threat by the global elites. Now, instead of telling you any more about it, let's go ahead and get down here into the video. All right. We'll go ahead and hit play.
Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy.
I now look to Mr. Winston Marshall to close the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, words have a tendency to change meaning. When I was a boy, woman meant someone who didn't have a cock. Populism has become a word used synonymously with racist, we've heard ethno-nationalist, with bigot, with hillbilly, redneck, with deplorables. Elites use it to show their contempt for ordinary people. This is a recent change. Not long ago, Barack Obama, while still president at the North America's Leaders Summit in June 2016, he took umbrage with the notion that Trump be called a populist. How could Trump be called a populist? He doesn't care about working people. If anything, Obama argued, he was the populist. If anything, Obama argued, Bernie was the populist. It was Bernie who'd spent 5 decades fighting for working people. But Trump. Something curious happens. If you watch Obama's speeches after that point, more and more recently, he uses the word populist interchangeably.
Now this is really interesting right here, how he catches that they take the word populism and turn it from a word that sounds like a good thing into a word they're using like a weapon. And I caught that as well, but he has a better way of putting it.
With strongman, with authoritarian, the word changes meaning. It becomes a negative, a pejorative, a slur. To me, populism is not a dirty word. Since the 2008 crash, and specifically the trillion-dollar Wall Street bailout, we are in the populist age. And for good reason. The elites have failed. Let me address some common fallacies, some of which have been made tonight. If the motion was that demagoguery was a threat to democracy, I would be on that side of the House. If the motion was that political violence was a threat to democracy, I'd be on that side of the House. January 6th has been mentioned. A dark day for America indeed. And I'm sure Congresswoman Pelosi will agree that the entire month of June 2020, when the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon was under siege and under insurrection by radical progressives, those two were dark days for America. Yes?
There is no equivalence of it. So, but yes.
So you don't agree? And it's fine, you don't agree, that's fine.
But it is not like what happened on January 6th, which was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
So you don't agree? But you'll condemn those days. My point though is that all political movements are susceptible to violence and indeed insurrection. And if we were arguing that fascism was a threat to democracy, I'd be on that side of the House. Indeed, the current populist age is a movement against fascism.
MAGA movement.
I've got quite a lot to get through. Populism, as you know, is the politics of the ordinary people against an elite. Populism is not...
Did y'all catch that definition, folks? Let me back that up for you. If you don't know what populism is, I like this definition, and it is absolutely true. We do live in a populist country, and with the exception of the elites trying to run everything, this country would be just fine with populism.
An elite. Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy.
That's right.
And why else have universal suffrage, if not to keep elites in check? Ladies and gentlemen, given the success of Trump, and more recently Javier Milei taking a chainsaw to the state behemoth of Argentina's bureaucratic monster, you'd be mistaken for thinking this was a right-wing populist age. But that would be ignoring Occupy Wall Street. That would be ignoring Jeremy Corbyn's for the many, not the few. That would be ignoring Bernie against the billionaires, RFK Jr. against Big Pharma. And all of them, including Galloway, recognize genuine concerns of ordinary people being otherwise ignored by the establishment. I'm actually rather surprised that our esteemed opposition, Congressman Pelosi, is on that side of the motion. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-elite. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-establishment.
About 30 years ago, believe it or not, during the 60s, folks, during the 70s, the Democrat Party was not the party of the elites, was not the party of big business. They were the party of the little guy, in theory. Maybe that was just a cover, a front, in order to try to get the blacks and the Hispanics and the all nationalities to vote for the Democrat Party, because they've always had their tricks up their sleeve. Maybe it's just been a front, but it seems like to me there's been a open shift now as to what it was and what it is now.
Today, particularly in America, the globalist left have become the establishment.
That's right.
I suppose for Ms. Pelosi to have taken this side of the motion, she'd be arguing herself out of a job. But it's here in Britain where right and left populists united for the supreme act of democracy, Brexit. Polls have showed the number one reason people voted for Brexit was sovereignty, for more democracy. Thank you. What was the response of the Brussels elite? They did everything in their power to undermine the democratic will of the British people, and the Westminster elite were just as disgraceful. As we've heard, David Cameron called the voters fruitcakes, loonies, and closet racists. The Liberal Democrats did everything they could to overturn a democratic vote.
Does that sound like any place you've ever been before? Does that sound like a story we've heard so similar? Sounds like the Liberal Democrats of England are acting just like the Liberal Democrats of America, trying to overturn elections, trying to rig elections, trying to besmirch people's good name, create hoaxes, just do whatever it takes, legal or not, to undermine authority in order to get their way. It's no different. I guess socialism knows no borders.
Keir Starmer campaigned for a second referendum. Elites would have had us voting and voting and voting until we voted their way. Indeed, that's what happened in Ireland and in Denmark. Let's look at some of the other populist movements. The Hong Konger populist revolt is literally called the pro-democracy movement. The farmer revolts from Netherlands to Germany, France, Greece to Sri Lanka. Farmers are taking their tractors to the road to protest ESG policy that's floated down to us from those all-knowing, infallible elites of Davos. The trucker movement in Canada became anti-elitist when petty tyrant Prime Minister Justin Trudeau froze their bank accounts, not the behavior of a democratic head of state.
It wasn't too long ago, folks. It shows you what's going on with these countries. It's not just America with these socialist policies that they're cramming down our throat, weaponizing government against the people, trying to squash the voice of the people with their censorship, with the taking the GoFundMe accounts down, imprisoning people, whatever they can do to squash opposition. And it's happening all over the world, folks. But I do see that conservative policies, populist policies are on the rise. And I believe this woke cancel culture is going to die by the wayside here in the next year or two. Just my predictions. And a lot of these shithole policies that have been generated by this socialist agenda are going to be not only exposed, but overturned and reverted back to America First type policies, for the people type policies. Here we go.
The Gilets jaunes in France, ULEZ in London, working people protesting policy that hurt them. And how are they treated? They're called conspiracy theorists. They're called far right by the mayor as well. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is the voice of the voiceless. The real threat to democracy is from the elites. Now, don't get me wrong. We need elites. If President Biden has shown us anything, we need someone to run the countries. When the president has severe dementia, it's not just America that crumbles, the whole world burns.
That's right.
But let's examine the elites. European corporations spend over 1 billion euros a year lobbying Brussels. US corporations spend over $2 billion a year lobbying in DC. 2/3 of Congress receive funding from pharmaceutical companies.
Ouch.
Pfizer alone spent $11 million in 2021. They made over $10 billion in profit. No wonder then that 66% of Americans think the economy is rigged against them for the rich and the powerful. And by the way, we used to have a word for when big business and big government were in cahoots. And I think any students here of early 20th century Italian history know what I'm talking about. What about big tech? Throughout the pandemic, Biden's team, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security colluded with big tech in censoring dissenting voices, not kooky conspiracy theorists. People like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the Stanford epidemiologist.
That was happening all over the world, folks. The amount of censorship that went on such a mass scale, most people probably do not realize that there must have been a massive coordinated effort between all intelligence agencies, not just America, but every country in the world, intelligence agencies getting together and deciding how they were going to handle pandemic response. And some shameful how it went down because the epidemiologists, the virologists, the big pharma pill company CEOs are the ones that actually made the decisions. Fauci, that the entire world followed through with, World Health Organization, NIH, all on the behest of, I'm going to go ahead and say it, not so much saving the planet, but in the name of profit, among other sinister things going on. Just my opinion, folks.
People like Harvard scientist Martin Kulldorff. People spreading true information, not misinformation, true information at odds with the government narrative. Need I remind you, democracy without free speech is not democracy. This was a direct breach, by the way, of the First Amendment. Before COVID, intelligence services colluded with big tech to have Trump suspended off Twitter. Yes,
Yep.
the same platform which hosted the Taliban and Ayatollah deaf to Israel Khomeini, they thought the president crossed the line when he tweeted on Jan 6th, quote, "Remain peaceful, no violence, respect the law and our great men and women in blue." That's a quote. You may be thinking now that Trump is a populist. You are right. He didn't accept the 2020 elections, and he should have. So should Hillary in 2016, so should Brussels, and so should Westminster in 2016, and so too should Congresswoman Pelosi, instead of saying the 2016 election was, quote, hijacked. Quote, hijacked.
Now, I don't agree with that, but for the most part, everything this guy's saying, I do believe. I don't actually think he has looked into what happened in the 2020 election. But at any rate, I do get his point about accepting results. But if the results were not on the up and up, then I don't agree with accepting them either. None of us do, folks. That's why we're here.
Thank you.
A nasty Pelosi.
That we don't accept the results of it.
Okay. What about the mainstream media? Let me read you some mainstream media headlines. The New Yorker, the day before the 2016 election. The case against democracy. The Washington Post, the day after the election. The problem with our government is democracy. The LA Times, June 2017. The British election is a reminder of the perils of too much democracy. Vox, June 2017. The two eminent political scientists say the problem with democracy is voters.
Damn.
New York Times, June 2017. The problem with participatory democracy is the participants. Mainstream media elites are part of a class who don't just disdain populism, they disdain the people. If the Democrats had put half their energy into delivering for the people, Trump wouldn't even have a chance in 2024. He shouldn't have a chance. You've had power for 4 years. From the fabricated Steele dossier to trying to take him off the ballot in both Maine and Colorado, the Democrats are the anti-Democrat party.
That's right.
All we need now is the Republicans to come out as the pro-monarchist party. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is not a threat to democracy, but I'll tell you what is. It's elites ordering social media to censor political opponents.
That's right.
It's police shutting down dissenters, be it anti-monarchists in this country or gender-critical voices here, or last week in Brussels, the National Conservative movement. I'll tell you what is a threat to democracy. It's Brussels, DC, Westminster, the mainstream media, big tech, big pharma, corporate collusion, and the Davos cronies. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off ordinary people as deplorable. The threat to democracy comes from those who smear working people as racists.
We've heard those terms a few times before. Deplorable, racist. Seems a little familiar. What do you think, folks?
The threat to democracy comes from those who write off working people as populists. And I'll say one last thing. This populist age can be brought to an end at the snap of a finger. All that needs to be done is for elites to start listening to, respecting, and, God forbid, working for ordinary people. Thank you.
I must say, I agree with about 90% of his speech there. He's calling things out. He's calling out everybody that needed to be called out, or at least a good handful. Glad to hear it, including calling out Dementia Joe. He doesn't sound like he is much of a Trump supporter, but at the same time, he sees the writings on the wall, and he sees just how how horrible the Democratic Party has gotten. Like, subscribe, and share. Vote a Patriot. Everybody have a great day. Over and out.